Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Dilemma, How to Stop Repeating Failed Strategies. I'm Vinny Civitello, Communications Manager for the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. With us today is Dennis Miller of Dennis C. Miller Associates, Inc. As a nonprofit leadership coach, Dennis has advised hundreds of nonprofit organizations across the country on how to unlock their true potential by working with them to improve the integration of board governance, leadership development, strategic planning, and philanthropy. He is a sought-after motivational speaker, retreat facilitator, leadership coach, and executive search consultant. A few housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you tomorrow along with the PowerPoint for today's presentation, so be on the lookout for those. If you just can't wait, you can download them right now from the Handouts tab, but I'd also like to draw your attention to the Questions tab. Dennis would be happy to take your questions at the end, so get them in as they come to you. One last thing, if you experience any issues with GoToWebinar's audio or visual while you're watching this, you can try refreshing your browser, but if that doesn't work, don't forget you will automatically be receiving that recording within 24 hours. So if you have to sign out and watch that, you won't miss anything. So now let's get things started. Dennis?
Vinny, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. How to finally stop repeating failed strategies. As all of you know, every nonprofit organization relies upon the philanthropic support of others to ensure you have the necessary resources to carry out your mission. So we're going to be talking about a couple things today in our objectives. We're going to look at re-examining our approach to fundraising. We're going to talk about understanding why people really give money. We're going to talk about the transition from the tin cup to the investment theory of fundraising. Very, very important. I'm going to spend as much time as I can is how to create an organizational culture of success, which focus on achievements and results, because that's where you will shine and dramatically improve your philanthropic success. And last but not least, but probably the most important part of this discussion is creating a tri-partnership of philanthropy. As many of you know, and I saw many of you that are attending and participating with us here today are development officers, and oftentimes we find ourselves doing it alone, and where is our board, where is our CEO? And only when you can have a real tri-partnership of philanthropy will we be successful here. We're going to talk about the roles that board members think they need to have, or sometimes what we ask them to have, which maybe is not very effective. Okay. I know that you all know this, but I just thought we would highlight this in terms of the total dollars giving, 450 billion. That's not million, billion in charity. But notice the top, the percentages for some reason aren't totaling 100. I did take math, but bear with me on that one here. But interesting, the amount of time we spend trying to seek money from corporations, and yet it's only 5% of the giving. Even foundations is under 20%. So even if you are successful in every corporation, every funding, you'll probably reach maybe 25% of your giving potential and philanthropic potential by doing it alone. So obviously, where money is on the individuals. So there's hundreds of books, articles, research. There's all kind of fundraising professionals that attend annual conferences and webinars, topics of major gifts and annual giving and online donations and donor technology strategies and software and all that. And yet, despite all that knowledge and research, why do so many people and so many organizations fail to achieve any level of success? I should point out in terms of my background, prior to starting my company 16 years ago, I spent 25 years in the healthcare world in New York and New Jersey. But at 38 years old, I was a CEO of a major medical center up in Bergen County. And I was a corporate executive in between for 7 years with a healthcare consulting company. But I was president and CEO of Somerset Medical Center in Somerset County, where we had a phenomenal level of success, and I've also been board chairs and raised a lot of money. So I'm going to share some of my experience with you that I believe and hopefully will be helpful to you. But I think we admit that many of us struggle. So I want to go over with you sort of a mythical day in the life of a development committee. And they usually go on something like this. So the committee chair calls the meeting to order. seeks approval of last month's meeting. And then the conversation starts with something like this. All right, who are we going to honor at this year's gala? And names come up. And we say, well, we honored his wife 2 years ago, or we honored him a couple years ago. And so who are we going to honor at the gala? Topics can change to say, okay, who's going to chair our golf outing this year and who can chair it? And okay, you know, John or Jane, can you do it again for the 4th year in a row? All right. Someone may bring up, hey, how about a wine tasting? How much money can we raise from a wine tasting? And that will come up here. The committee chair then says, let's turn to a list of our major prospects that everybody was asked to submit for review and discussion. And great silence develops in the room. There's not a lot of names submitted. And to avoid embarrassment, the committee chair says, listen, let's table discussion on major prospects to next month's meeting when more people actually will attend the meeting, and let's go back and talk about the table settings for this year's gala. And that's what happens a lot with a development committee meeting. And the question is, why is that there's such a sort of reluctance and a fear to talk about board's role in major prospects? Why is that? So one of the things I created a program many years ago, some of you may know, it was at Fairleigh Dickinson University, called the Center for Excellence, Leadership, Governance, and Philanthropy. And one of the courses that I taught was, of course, how to avoid the fundraising Bermuda Triangle, which is the flip side of how to create a tri-partnership in philanthropy. Now, many of you are board members. I know many of you are CEOs, and many of you are development consultants and development experts. The overwhelming number of volunteers who serve on our boards and your boards are very well-meaning people, and they want to do the right thing, and they want your organization to succeed. And I want to make it clear, in no way as part of my presentation am I being critical of anybody. It's just my observations of, I used to say 25 years of experience. I had to say 35. I'm not ready to say 40, but let's say 35 years of experience. And so, but we have to admit that generally speaking, we do a pretty ineffective job of training our board members on how to become successful in philanthropy. Oftentimes, we don't even approach the topic in board recruitment. And many times we don't approach the topic at all, even in board orientation, with the fear that we bring it up, they won't even join our board here. So the question is, how many of you, either your board members, your CEO, would rather have a root canal than raise money? I oftentimes used to say, how many would you rather stick pins in your eyes and raise money? And I think the answer is probably many people. Now, we oftentimes think that just because someone is the president of the bank or the vice president of pharmaceutical sales or whatever, that they're successful in business, or they're a successful community leader, will translate to success in all the fundraising, and it does not. Rarely does it do it, okay? We have, I believe, oftentimes very unrealistic expectation for board members. We think they know things that they don't know, and also things that they're very uncomfortable with. So I tell people that sometimes, constantly reminding your board about their roles and responsibilities in fundraising is often like reminding your kids to clean the room. My kids are grown and out of the house, but it's rarely effective. I just tell people, let the pizza boxes build up so they can't get out the door, and then they'll clean it up themselves. But reminding people their roles and responsibilities is not that effective. So let's talk about why people give money. And I know most of you know this, but there's two things particularly I want to focus in on at this part of this slide here. We do know that people give money because they've been asked. The #1 research says people have been asked and they give money. You ask them, why did you give to so-and-so? Because someone asked me. It's not a secret. People want to give. If you have the ability to give, people want to give. It's generally speaking, it should not have to be arm twisting. You know this, if people give to someone they trust and respect, they give to make a difference in the world or the community. Some people give for tax reasons. I think if it was not a tax break, it would have a big impact, but on research, it's not the top 4 or 5 reasons people give. But there's 2 things in particular I want to focus in on today, is that people give to success, not to distress. To success, not to distress. And the second thing, it might seem like a play on words, but people give to the needs of those you serve, not your organizational needs. So yes, do you have needs for programming and facilities and staffing and etc.? Absolutely. But if you present your organizational needs for giving, your likelihood of success is lower than if you focus about the needs of those you serve. So I want to talk about the tin cup theory of fundraising. So when I was a little boy, a couple of decades ago, I grew up though I was born in Hudson County, I grew up in Middlesex County, and every couple of years, if my mom had any money, my mom took my brothers and I, and maybe my sister to Radio City musical to see the Christmas show. And we would take the bus into the Port Authority. And who was always outside the Port Authority was this sort of disheveled looking beggar sitting on a cardboard box selling pencils in a tin cup. And to most of us, we perceive fundraising as begging. And to most of our board members that have very little experience with this, they also perceive it as begging. And it's very uncomfortable and very painful, okay? And it becomes sort of, I need, it becomes a transaction. And so we need to transition from sort of the, I need this to the following here. We've got to transition to the investment theory of fundraising. And I want to give you a real example that happened probably 15 years ago. It stuck with me and I never forgot it. I was asked by an organization in New Jersey. I know we're all dealing with NJBIA members. And people asked me if I would do a workshop or a retreat on fundraising. And I remember asking them, it's just on fundraising, not governance, not leadership, nothing, just fundraising. I said, fine. The board chair, she owned a restaurant across the street from a major historical courthouse. And I didn't know hardly anybody on the board, except there was one gentleman that was on the board that worked for one of my board members. And I remember starting the conversation off, and I asked them if they could tell me their top 2 achievements this year. And there was a deafening silence. And a woman spoke up and said, we did our budget on time. Seriously. And I didn't want to display any emotions, and I thank you. Any other achievements? And a woman said, we only spend so much money on fundraising. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a very long night. And then finally, a woman in the back of the room says, we do a program here called PALS, P-A-L-S. This organization dealt with domestic violence and sexual assault. And they talked about how we have a program called PALS that we treat children, boys and girls who've been subjected to trauma from sexual assault, domestic violence, so they can be able to relate to peers again, to relate to parents and parent surrogates, teachers, classmates, etc. They help people heal so they can have relationships. And I am thinking to myself, Grand Slam, home run, bottom of 9th inning, World Series, wonderful. Unbelievable, thank you. And I asked them, how well do you communicate that success, that achievement? And they said to me, we do a better job now internally, but we don't do a good job outside. And I said to them 15 years ago, I said, that's why that you're not going to raise money. I said, you have to communicate your success here. So part of the questions is, we're generally speaking, and I'm saying generally speaking, and I know there's a whole gamut of from left to right here. And many organizations do proudly talk about their success and achievements. And I know the word outcomes comes up a lot from grant funders. They want outcome measures and everything. But the question really is how do we communicate our outcomes? How do we communicate our results and the impact? And so we transition. Organizations that focus on the investment theory of fundraising no longer had board members that have the fear of rejection, because it's no longer personal. It's not if I ask you to give and you say no, I'm going to feel rejected, which is the main reason most board members are very uncomfortable. It's just an emotional understanding, which is true, is it's just a fear of rejection. And who wants to be rejected? Not many people that I know of. And so what you want to do is transition from your needs as an organization to giving to success, and clearly understanding, donor values and the value to the donor. So the big part of understanding the changing strategies to stop constantly repeating our failures is to understand why people give money to success, not to distress, and to the needs of those you serve. And then how do we transform ourselves from asking for what we need to investing in our success? Yeah. So I created a term many years ago, and one of the first books I wrote, I always joke that if Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together correctly, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew I wrote 5 books, she'd have a real heart attack and go back to her grave. But I always describe sort of your nonprofit stock price. And I remember, being the president of the medical center, asking people, so how's the stock price doing? And kind of a joke, a little bit, kind of a joke. And I'm well aware that, you're all 503Cs or 4Cs or some 6Cs, and I get the whole deal here. But the question is, I want you to think about this. How do you, as an organization, communicate the positive impact you are having in the community? How do you do it? How often do you do it? At each board meeting, how often do you discuss your achievements and successes? We know you discuss your finances. We know you to give an update on programs and service. We know you give an update on things, what's going on with your galas and things like that. How often do you focus in on achievements and successes? It's remarkable how board members can become engaged and motivated when they start to talk about the success you have. We all talk about this, but are your board members really passionate and committed to serve as your community ambassadors? How often do your stakeholders hear directly from you, from the benefits, from those you serve, I mean? One of the best things I tell people is on your own website, on the homepage, have people that you have served tell their story. I mean, you can have your CEO tell the story, you can have board members tell the story, you can have your development tell the story. How impactful is it when people can hear directly from those you serve? I strongly believe about video testimonials expressing your gratitude. Now I'm going to tell a true story that has a difficult comment in it, and you're going to grasp, but it has a very positive ending, and it's the same organization that helped me with the issue of PALS and communicating their achievements and successes with children. So this organization wanted to, as we got them prepared to become more engaged and more motivated, have a vision, ready to be asking people to contribute to their success, they decided they wanted to have a gala. And at a well-known gala place in Middle Jersey, actually the Palace at Somerset Park. And I remember I asked them if there was anybody on the, if there's anybody who could tell their story. And the first reaction was obviously, well, no, it's kind of confidential, it's a domestic bond. And I said, again, and the CEO said, I think there's one woman that will tell her story. So I said, is there any chance we can meet with her just for a few minutes, the week before the gala? We did, and she told her story. And so you got 400 people in tuxedos and beautiful dresses and jewelry and cocktails and everybody having a good time. And this woman gets up to speak. And I'm going to tell you, it's difficult, but it has a very positive. She talked about how she met her future husband in high school, how he was not physically, but kind of, became kind of a controlling figure. But she fell in love and got married, and she talked about how he became more controlling. And she talked about a very difficult time, how he had, and bear with me with this, he had burnt the house down, and the kids were in the house. But And she said, but everybody survived. The kids survived. He went to prison. But just because of this organization, because of everybody who's here today, because of the support you gave me and my two daughters, we have a new life today. We have a healthy life. We're living a good life today. Thank God to this organization. Hearing from them was an impressive presentation. It dropped the room dead. Everybody get up, and the silent auction became very successful here. A key part I want to talk about too, and in addition to transitioning from the tin cup to the investment theory and giving to success, and we're going to talk about the tri-partnership in a second here, is by itself, we need to create organizations that have cultures of success. Now, these are some of the characteristics that they have, and I'm going to talk about just a few here. Clearly, integrity is the number one characteristic of successful fundraising organizations. Integrity, simple, but integrity. Passion, an ongoing passion for what you do. A constant quest for excellence. They have an inspiring vision. I would venture to guess, with my experience, that over 90% of nonprofit organizations that I deal with across the country, large, international, well-known, and small, couple $100,000 budgets, oftentimes don't have a real vision. They have a mission statement, but they don't have a compelling vision, or they have a vision statement that's almost like a mission statement. But most people, interesting, I'm doing a retreat right now virtually for someone, and not one of their 16 board members could articulate their vision. Strategic thinkers, they have a positive attitude about, yes, we can, not, well, we tried it once, it didn't work out. But they have effective governance. I'm going to talk about this in a second here. Today, boards need to evolve. And we're going to talk about this in a second. I'll let that come in. But we have to change the role of the board. Otherwise, no matter what you try to do to raise more money, it's never going to work if your board doesn't change its understanding of its role here. Cultures of success organizations have one, are cultivating and soliciting. But here's important. Here's a great question we're going to ask a little bit later, but you got to create an organization worthy of a gift. So I want to just talk about one aspect of a culture of success, is the stages of board governance. Based upon my research and the research of others, I'm going to describe 4 particular areas, and you know most of these areas. A founding board is simple. Every organization that you're on, someone founded it. Someone founded a school, someone founded a hospital, someone founded something. I've been fortunate to have done a tremendous amount of work with Make-A-Wish, and if everyone knows the story about Make-A-Wish, a young boy in Arizona had horrible cancer, and his mom wanted him to, he always dreamed about being a police officer, and his mom wanted him to see if he could spend the time in a police car before he passed away. And one of the local police officers sort of a semi-adopted him and got him a uniform and a hat and took him on a couple of road trips. And lo and behold, that's how Make-A-Wish started, and so many. And you have wonderful stories. So, and the challenge with founding boards, obviously, is the founding syndrome. The founders can't let go of control. Most boards certainly need to. It's a legal requirement. Operate at the fiduciary level, overseeing, making sure that the financials are in order, corporate compliance, ethics, and all that stuff are done. That's really important, and always will important, because as always, I ask people, what are the 2 reasons why you have a nonprofit board? And they're just basic. One is because it's legal required, which is just a no-brainer, but it is legal required. And number 2, that you need a board to help you reach your full potential. Most boards evolve, they continue the fiduciary role, but most boards evolve and become sort of business strategic advisors. And we want different business skills. We want a lawyer, a doctor, a nurse, etc., businessman, CPA, and boards play the role of business planning, strategic planning, may have a strategic planning committee, but still over 80% of nonprofit boards function somewhere in the fiduciary strategic business role, but it's still a passive role, meaning that at the end of the board meeting, with few exceptions, most board members have little interaction with the organization until the next meeting. What we need to, in my experience with high-performing boards and working to create high-performing boards, is The fourth stage of board governance is where it'll transform your organization's philanthropy to a level unseen before. It's where your board partners with the CEO in form of leadership. It's not micromanaging, but it's a partnership where the board feels a sense of ownership, that they want to achieve your success as much as you do. They have a sense of ownership. They want to introduce you to people to make connections or relationships. It is vitally important, and boards become one of the leaders together. It's a quite, now to be that as a CEO, you need to feel secure amongst yourself and certainly confident that you want to partner with people. And again, the roles are clearly defined. It's not micromanaging. They're not running the organization, but it's sort of like a good marriage or a good family or a good business where everybody has a sense of ownership. And that's how I describe the level of being a partner. I want to talk about next the tri-partnership of philanthropy, which is a challenge for most people. And I'm going to go over, particularly when you get into the role of the board, an issue about where we want our board members to be asking for money. And I'm going to be a little unconventional, and I'm going to explain to you why I don't want your board members to do that. And it's surprising. So let's talk about the tri-partnership here. So the first one, obviously, is the role of the CEO. Now, you may have the role of executive director. And many times, executive directors also, they may have been brought up in the business at a much younger age, and fundraising and philanthropy was not their thing, and they got in for all the good reasons about wanting to make a good social change and things like that. But the money came through public sources, and so this is not their cup of tea. But what's the role that you as a CEO or your CEO needs to have? I use the word CEO as Chief External Officer. They need to be the person that helps you distinguish your organization from others in the community. They need to be building a relationship with all key internal and external shareholders. It's relationship building. You can find, everybody wants to find the richest man or woman on the hill in town. But if there's no connection that family or individual has with you, they're not going to give you anything. We talked about this before, being the chief communications officer, the chief brand officer. I mean, you want to be, and I know it's not comfortable for a lot of people. And I had to learn it myself here, believe it or not, to articulate our successes and our achievements. And, it's something that most of us have been uncomfortable with because it's not the reason we went in to be touting our horn. And I even mentioned it to Vinny early on. I said, Vinny, I believe it or not, I'd rather you introduce me than I have to introduce myself. So, do as I say, not necessarily as I do here. And though I had a great deal of achievements, I'd rather, not have to talk about myself. But the CEO also needs to play a key role in cultivating and soliciting donors with your development officer and your board. So that's the role. And until the CEO, executive director, begins to assume this kind of a role, you can be a development officer that walks on water and you're going to struggle because they're not helping you. And this is something that can be taught. This is something that we recruit for in our search business. But this is for all of you that are CEOs or executive directors or board members, this is what your CEO needs to do. Next. Now, the role of the board. Well, you know this mostly, clearly advocate for your mission. I mean, I like to see board members on their LinkedIn profile, mention that they're on your board. I think, having name tags, business cards for the lapels, whatever, about your organization. Hey, if you don't communicate to them your successes and achievements, how are they going to? If you think they're just here to their own problems. I'm going to come back to this, my next slide here. Certainly, you want them to be active participants in special events, but there's some organizations that have an event every week. It's not realistic. Golf outing, gala, wine tasting, 5K, 10K, 2K, whatever. It's not realistic. Certainly, having notes on an annual appeal is applicable, and we're going to come to this in a second, making a contribution and stewardship. But here's big change that I found that that I teach is that with few exceptions, and I mean very few exceptions, board members are not good, they're not trained, they're not experienced, and I say there are exceptions, asking people for money. Now, you can, and it's their role, if you're looking to help people get sponsorships to their businesses and professional members, absolutely. But asking to be a sponsor and asking to make a contribution is very different. So here's what I want. Since most board members we talked about, right, would rather have a root canal than ask, right? Would rather have a root canal. I don't want them asking for money because in my experience, they will ask for too little or accept too little. And so here's what I want instead. Let's assume you have 10 members. It's easy to do the math, okay? So let's assume you have 10 board members. I want every year, each one of my board members to make a commitment of a minimum of 3 to help me cultivate 3 groups, either an individual, a family, a corporation, or a foundation. 3. Not 5, not 10, not submit my list to the development committee of all my prospects because they're not going to follow up on it. Rarely do they do. And that's prospects as for sponsorships. That's fine. You can send it to your fellow members in a chamber and things like that. Yeah, but I want just 3 people. So now, and I don't want them doing the ask. And now the good news is you're going to relieve them of the anxiety they had all from the beginning. So I want to think of this picture for a second here. I hope it's funny, by the way, but think of this picture. So think about, you have a 30-year-old son and daughter living at home, and you say to them, listen, honey, mom and dad, we think it's time for you to get married. So we want you to go to the mall this weekend and try to find someone to get married and move in with. And I'll drop you off at Nordstrom's and kind of go from there. Now, think about how ludicrous that is, walking around in front of Nordstrom's, Macy's, Nathan's hot dog stand. I mean, that's how we make board members feel when we ask them specifically in philanthropy. We just do. But if I say, I don't want you to ask, I want you to help me introduce me to at least 3 people in a year. Now, 3 to 5 is ideal, but 3. Now I have, as a development officer, I now have 30 possibilities that I can work as a development officer helping with my board and my CEO, finding ways of cultivating a relationship and inviting him to one of our events, and inviting him to meet with us, inviting him for lunch. Just saying, hey, is there any way you could introduce me to Jane Doe or John Doe and have sort of a breakfast? Just introduction, not make a transaction, not come out them with some pamphlet about how to give. Now you've got 30 people. That's more than you had before here. The second thing, so that's different. And now you have in your development committee, now you have these 30 names, and now you have a chance to follow up on, but you're not asking for them. Because the person that's best going to be asking is probably going to be either your development officer, who's probably more trained, or your CEO. And you know this, and some people just want this, they wanted the king dog to come in the room, so the CEO, whatever here. But people can be trained. But I want the board not to be this onus about your responsibilities to be asking. I want people to be helping me cultivate relationships. Now, the next below the line here is about making an annual contribution. It comes up a lot. Everybody on the board needs to be told during the recruitment process, and whatever board orientation you have, which is little or none, that you want them to make an annual gift subject to the means. Now, in some organizations, maybe it's $100, it's $500, $1,000, whatever it is. I don't like the idea of a give or get number, and I'll just tell you why. I think give or gets are important to set a mindset, and you can let people know the range of board gifts that they go from $500 to $10,000, or from $100 to $1,000, or whatever it is, So they have a sort of a set of what's expected. But when you have a give or get, and I had an experience with an organization that before I got there, they created a give or get. And the one person that had to leave the board because of that was the local minister, and he was the most respected person in the community. So you lost the person that had the ability to help you cultivate a relationship because of give or get. And I find this, and I hope maybe you do too, when I see give or gets, the get becomes a ceiling. So whatever size organizations that you are, okay, and most of you are sort of small, mid-sized, and some large. But if you give or get is, give or get 5,000, give or get 10,000, whatever the number is. If you can give more than that, you're only giving the top number. So I want to, in this tri-partnership, that I explain this role, the CEO, I want my board to have a different role. I want him to be my ambassador, but I want him to feel the passion for the organization, the success we have. If they don't, through your meetings and your relationships and cultivation, if they don't feel your passion, if they don't see the success that you're having, asking them to invite people to give to your success will never happen. And you'll go on with the same strategies that you have failed time after time. Okay. So what's the role if I'm a development officer? Well, it's pretty straightforward here. You're the quarterback. You're the quarterback of the team. You put the game plan together. You are helping educate the board, helping educate your CEO, which is most times. You are developing a comprehensive, diversified fundraising plan. We've seen where the donors are before. Most places have some, they have a little bit, they have an annual giving opportunity. There's some grant opportunities and corporate giving and special events. But as we indicated, the numbers in the beginning of the slide was the $450 billion. Like 70% of that's individuals, and yet we spend so little time on that. We spend time trying to get a corporation to give us money and a foundation to give us money, which is fine. But if you struck 100%, you still only going to get 25% of what you're possible getting here. So it's important for the development to have a case for support, a written case for support that I outlines, what is it that you do? Why can people invest? What will be the benefit of it? And what's the value to them? I think another thing that's crucially important is, besides soliciting gifts here, is provide effective stewardship. I also was a board chair of my youngest son, a private high school in New Jersey many years ago, and I chaired the board, and we changed the culture of philanthropy tremendously and raised a lot of money. But years later, they went back to ask one of the alums who gave $75,000 for another gift, and he said, no one ever thanked me. And so we all had shame on our face. How could it possibly have done here? One last thing here about stewardship, that if you haven't done this, you might think about this, because this makes people feel confident. And as you know, in anything in life, and I feel this way, we talked about unrealistic expectations of our boards, is that one of the things that we said this, just because you're the president of the bank does not mean you have confidence in this. But here's what I'd like you to do. Think about maybe you have a stewardship night where every member of the board gets a script and maybe gets 10 names of people that made a contribution to you, and you scripted it, you call them, you have their contact number. And at first you say, hi, I'm John Doe from the board of Huntington or whatever. And they're going to want to hang up. So no, I want to thank you for making the contribution of this year of $100 to us. It was really important what we did. Our children, whether it was able to be in summer camp for next week or not, I'm thanking them. Just thank the donor and nothing else. You're not saying, okay, but can you give that? Not that. Just thank them. Have a conversation. As a board member, I want to thank you. So what does that do? It builds a phenomenal sense of self-confidence of people that haven't had experience with that doing it. Give it a shot. Okay. Now, there are 3 questions that every board member, but every CEO and every development officer need to be able to answer. And you can go back to your respective organizations and ask us, which is this: what's the value we provide to our community? What are our top achievements? Is it PALs, or is it you did your budget on time? And why are we worthy of a gift? So could you imagine this? Imagine being a high performing board and start off your board meeting with something like this. I want to call the meeting to order. Thank you. I want to hear a motion on approval minutes of our last meeting. All in favor, say aye. Before we get to our committee reports, we want to have a discussion today about what value we provide to our community. Imagine that conversation. I want to talk about why we're worthy of a gift. Think about that. So when we think about all the challenges we have of the same old, we struggle with our annual appeal. We try for grants and corporations. We do okay. We have our gala, which is great. We all have a good time. Now most galas are either canceled or virtual. I'm spending my time virtual, but it's 50 cents on a dollar. I feel from my experience, and I have done this firsthand, so I'm not asking you to do anything that I haven't done myself or haven't advised others to do that have changed their entire operations. When you move on to focus in on your successes and achievements, and that becomes your mantra, and you beat that drum, and you're so proud of what you're impacting because you touch and feel the people you're helping, and you now sought to get your board to want to invest in success. It's an emotional connection, it's not a transaction. And kind of closing here before we take questions, this is a team effort. And for all of you as development officers, the average tenure at development oftentimes is 18 months to 2 years because they hope the board helps them and they don't. So, but all three parties must have a team effort. And that's how you will avoid the fundraising Bermuda Triangle. This works. It takes change, it takes effort, but the results of your successes will be phenomenal. When people in the organization learn that people give to success, not to the stress and not to your organization needs, to your success, when board members are encouraged and motivated to become a part with your CEO in creating a culture of success, when fear of asking for money is replaced with a passion and a commitment to ask donors to invest in your success, your nonprofit fundraising dilemma will become a distant memory, and you will have created a powerful culture of philanthropy for years to come. Now, we want to take some questions here. Hopefully, Vinny can get this up here. And here's one thing I want to just about questions here. If you have a question, even if you think it's a silly question, someone else was probably thinking that's why I asked the question. Number two, if you're sitting next to your board chair or your CEO and you want to ask her a question and it's about them, just say, I have a friend that has this issue, so you can do that here. So let's see if we have any.
Thankfully, we're all quarantined, so I can't imagine we're going to have too many of those. But we do have a few questions that have come through. I want to give everyone a second to type in anything they have. While I'm doing that, I'd like to remind you about the Handouts tab. We get a lot of questions about how to download our slides. So by all means, open up the Handouts tab of your GoToWebinar panel, and they should be right there. You can also just wait, and they'll be emailed to you sometime in the next 24 hours along with the recording. So with all that out of the way, let's dig right into the first question that is, what if my board members are saying they gave their time, that was their contribution, and they don't need to give money?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And the honest is, why would I give to you? You're giving your time as expected. And we appreciate your time. But if you want me personally to make a contribution to you, unless you're in the game, money talks. It's not enough. It just doesn't fly well. And I know that's a big issue for a lot of people that give my time. And many you can't give, but give $1 a day, give something. I mean, because that's really the sign of your commitment there. So that's how it's not enough to just do that. Go
ahead. The issue of asking board members for development context is tricky for boards where members are selected for diversity. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I again go back. I mean, I think the challenge when boards are legislatively appointed, it's very difficult. When someone's been appointed to your board because of the governor or because of the county executive and they're on those type of boards, it's very difficult. But if you're been appointed to the board, I mean, and should have boards that reflect your community, whether it's racial, gender, sexuality, whatever. Um, Part of the deal of why you're on the board, and I want to come back to this, before we end here, but the course will be over. But part of the deal is that, and it doesn't happen overnight. You don't join the board immediately become automatically passionate, but it takes time. But if you see the success you're having, you see the impact you're having on an individual or family or life or whatever, or your community, whatever it is, your theater, your children's programs, um, whatever, CASA, shares. I mean, everybody's on the call here. Everybody should be helping to cultivate and share it, because if you don't believe in the organization, then why are you there? So it should not be arm twisting. This should be something you want to do because, example, it's not the best analogy, but if you go to a restaurant and you really like it, you probably will go back and might even bring a friend. Well, if you like the restaurant, and why wouldn't you do the same about the organization you're volunteering for? That's my response, man.
This one is, my board relies on me to share our successes. They take what I tell them at face value and tend to judge my performance on whether or not I meet budget. How can I get them to answer the question about what they think our organization's successes are?
Yeah, I think actually it's a good topic to have at a retreat, and I facilitate many of them, is that, and have it. And I don't want to get into a selling to them. We have tools on our website and everything, but you want to have a conversation with them. I mean, that's why I talked about early on about starting off a board meeting, about having a conversation. But here's something that I don't know if I covered it or not, but here's one thing I want to focus in on for that question here. Use the 50% rule. And my course is about how to become a high performing board and really successful. Easy following steps here is 50% rule is this. At half your board meeting, on average, now there are times when it's going to be 20% and times 80%, half your board meeting have on the agenda, what are those key questions about what are our achievements? What is the value provided to the community? That's have a discussion. I mean, I can't, how many times I've seen people that say, I can't get a quorum at my board, and I go to a board meeting and it's like, it's so boring. Who would show up? And so this is the job, to make this an engaging conversation, and there are your volunteers. So engage them in a conversation. What are they here? And you'd be surprised what they'll say, and it gets them involved. So that's my response to
that. I've had several people verbally say they would donate for our organization, but they don't follow through. What would be an appropriate way to hold them accountable on actually making a donation?
Yeah, well, let's assume it's just an annual gift, and I'm not getting into the complications of a capital campaign and a pledge, but an annual gift here. It's appropriate to, follow up with a letter, follow up with an email. These days is appropriate, and just sort of follow what. I mean, that's what happens to me. We try to make a contribution to every one of our current clients, during our term of our engagement, and I might have to remind them, you made a contribution. I said, we'll get a check out. So I think it's important to follow up. People forget. I think it's important to do that. A phone call or an email is appropriate. Absolutely. A phone call and email is probably more appropriate than a letter. A letter today looks like a reprimand. So email is fine. Phone call is fine.
Any thoughts relating specifically to virtual asks with donors, especially those who are newly introduced to you by board members?
Yeah, listen, I think today it's very relevant. I think that you need to. The country and the world is going through the most challenging time in the last 100 years. So I think it's very appropriate, but it's the same thing. Even when you're doing it virtually, we think about it. It's it's not a transaction. It's not like you're not just selling a ticket to your event. You're selling the organization, and it takes time for people to want to sort of adopt you. And it's a process, and so that's why the word is called cultivation, not just solicitation. So virtual cultivations are great to have. Absolutely, it's a great time to get to know people, for them to see you, but as often as you can, if you could even show them like a 2 minute, 1 minute, maybe 3 minute maximum little video about your organization and the impacting, that you want to appeal to their heart and to their mind both times, heart and mind together.
Right now, donors are focused on the priorities raised by the pandemic. How do we keep their focus on our organization in spite of the pandemic?
Say that again, please, just one more time.
Sure. Right now, donors are focused on the priorities raised by the pandemic. How do we keep their focus on our organization in spite of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a valid question. Everybody is impacted by this across the world. But here's what I'd say: you're still having an impact. Now, some of your programs may have been shut down. Some may have been, but others haven't. It's still important for you today to convey to the people that have been your donors the impact you're having. Not just that you're open and how large you are and how many programs you go, but it's very important to communicate to people the impact you're having and ask them for a gift, because though, the world is, the economy is way down and it's going to be down for a long time, but still, you're having an impact and you need resources to continue to impact. So you've got to ask. And there are people, and there's $450 billion was given last year pre-pandemic. I know that, but there are organizations that are doing well by sort of pitching the impact they're having on others, not about themselves. Remember, pitch the impact you are particularly having. You got to do it.
How important are storytelling and the use of social media for fundraising?
I think storytelling is the key to success. Social media is very important. I mean, in our business, we use social media. I laugh all the time. I mean, my joke is that I hired someone, I remember 12 years ago, to do social media, and the woman asked me what my URL was, and I asked her, what is URL? I didn't have a clue. I'm a technological idiot, And so, but I think today it's very important to use social media, different platforms, Constant Contact, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that kind of stuff here. But it's storytelling. It's showing the success you're having, but through the eyes of others. There's nothing more important than that. We on our own at our firm, we put up a lot of video testimonies from clients, and people don't want to hear about me rambling about how good we are, or to have other people that benefited from your work tell the story. Storytelling is crucial. It's important. Think about this for a second. I know we're getting into time here, but back decades ago, who was the best fundraiser of all? Was Jerry Lewis, right? It was the MDA Telethon. What did Jerry do? He brought people on stage. He brought them on stage so they could tell the story. You could see them in a wheelchair. And it was unprecedented television. There's no sense keeping a secret. And there's no sense being ashamed at all about asking for money, because you need it, but there are people that will gift you. And the competition is fierce, but so what? That's life. That's life. Storytelling is crucial.
How do I get my board more engaged during our meetings?
Again, I go back to, I think that if you have a typical board agenda that calls the meeting to order, CEO of report, and they read the report that they already handed out, and it's just committee reports, that's fine, but it's passive. I just want to go back to a slide here again, and we'll send more out to all your members later, but created 2 courses this year: how to become a high-performing nonprofit board and how to become a high-performing nonprofit leadership team. And we're making some changes in pricing for different size organizations, which will be announced probably next week. So we'll let members of NJBIA know that NJBIA is a strategic partner with the courses here. But one of the things that high performing boards do is that they have that alignment where the board's a partner, but they engage him in a conversation. The board chair's role is not just to have a meeting to report on what's happened in the past. There are always strategic issues we're having today, and you got to take time to have those discussions. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's how do you engage and motivate your board members. You've got to be asking them. So, based upon what you've heard over the past 3 months, what's your impression of our organization? What questions do you have? Engage them. It's no different in cultivating a relationship. You don't meet somebody, your future partner or future spouse or whatever. You don't meet them and then start thinking, well, you're going to stay over at my house. You have a conversation and you end up having a relationship. It's the same thing. Have a relationship. Just basic skills here.
This next question comes from a board member themselves. How about for board members who do not have enough resources to give a substantial amount? One board member of a board I was on poo-pooed an endowed gift that did not reach a certain level. I did not give it his expected level over $25,000 for an endowed gift. It was difficult to raise enthusiasm after that. How do you manage those responses?
So my understanding of the question, and I do have a little bit of hearing problem, is that some board member turned down a donation because it wasn't enough.
I guess either turned it down or scoffed at it, let's say.
Yeah, I don't, well, a couple of things here. I don't think you should scoff at any significant donation. I mean, I have example though. It depends why they're giving. I had a situation and at the medical center where I won't mention what special, I had a physician mentioned that, his family was prominent and they wanted to make a donation, but behind it was they wanted their family, it was something really for him, the doctor, it was to promote him. And we didn't pursue that. But I don't know the specifics here, but I think you always have to think about putting yourself in the donor's place. So if a donor feels they're going to make a gift to you of $25,000 and you don't feel that's enough, now, it could be that they've given $1 million out 5 times in the past year, but maybe you haven't cultivated them enough. I don't know enough about it, but my initial reaction to that, and I'm gonna clarify this a bit, but my initial reaction is never to disparage a donor. But here's something I want to say to everybody. As you're all members of NJBA as I am, and so one of the things I'm gonna offer everybody on this call between next week and until the end of August. And I'm a busy guy, but I want to do this for everybody. If you want to have an individual conference call with me by Zoom or whatever for 30 minutes and for free, I'll do it for you. If you want to have other people participate in the call, I'll do it for you. All you got to do is email me, dennis@denniscmiller.com. If you don't put the C in, there's a Dennis Miller furniture store in Brooklyn, literally, that gets emails. Dennis@denniscmiller.com. Send me an email, and I'm happy to schedule a call to go over this stuff with you. I know, I've seen it firsthand. I'll give you an example here. This is not just patting myself on the back here, but when I got to Somerset Medical Center in 1999, I was a young 49 years old. My predecessor, in his best day, raised $3 million. $3 million. Board members didn't give. Image in the community was poor. In 3 years, when we rolled out our expansion and our campaign, we were told at best by a well-known firm that I still I recommend to people that we could raise maybe $12 million. And I didn't do it because I had some academic background. I just did things intuitively that turned out to be part of this presentation today. We raised $30 million. I've been in my son's school that never raised anything. They have a culture of philanthropy that's off the charts. I've been in organizations that were, I call them Trump kids, almost going out of business. If you understand the basics about why people give to success and to your needs, and you get your board engaged. If your board's not engaged, if your board is just checking out, looking at their phone and their watch while in the meeting here, and you're boring to death, and you wonder why they're not helping out. So I'm willing to offer a free 30-minute consultation to anybody that's on this call, that's part of the webinar, by emailing me, dennis@dennisemail.com. I'm happy to do it. I don't care if you want to have 10 people on the call. I don't care if you make a video call. I'll set them up myself here. I want to help you. We will be sending you information, though, about our courses that I just want to take 2 minutes if I can. Created 2 online courses that in total, each course is only about an hour long. It comes with a certificate. You get a certificate. It comes with a workbook. Each course has about 8 or 9 modules. Each module has about 3 or 4 topics. It deals with how to become a high performer. It deals with philanthropy. It deals with, on the leadership side, does the same thing about leadership and boards. It talks about how to do the things boards need to do, about board succession, board behavior, everything. And so, you take this for over a period of 6 months, and we're actually offering, if anybody signs up between now and the end of August, we're giving you the first 2 months for free. So we'll go send you the information, because we have the update on the screen here what the monthly subscription rate is, but we're going to change it for smaller organizations a little bit next week. So I just hope I've answered most of the questions. I hope you benefited from this here. I thank you for what you do for all of us in New Jersey. And Vinny, if there's no other questions, I thank you for the opportunity as a member of NJBIA to participate in today's webinar, and how to stop failed strategies and change the non-fundraising dilemma to be even more successful.
Sure, thanks, Dennis. So don't forget, all of you will be receiving a recording of today's webinar and the PowerPoint slides via email within the next 24 hours. Lastly, when you close out of the webinar, a survey will come up on your screen that we hope you'll fill out so we can understand how to best provide you important information in a webinar format. Our next webinar, Cow or Buffalo, Leading During and After COVID-19, will take place Monday at 2:30. So by all means, feel free to register for that one right on our website at njbia.org/webinars. So until next time, for Dennis Miller, this is Vinny Civitello thanking you for being with us and wishing you a great day.